Good morning, Warhawks. I'm Joey. Today is Thursday, March 11th. This is WTN News. Thanks for tuning in. We are just one more wake up from spring break, and then we have 9 days off. Get your Chick-fil-A and B-Haul today. Last night, we had an amazing night here at Seminole. Our incoming 9th graders for next year came for registration night. They were able to speak to current students and teachers about all the academies, clubs, sports, and activities we have here at Seminole and how to get plugged in. Thanks to all that made the great evening possible. We want to remind you that we have drawings monthly for you to win Chick-fil-A, Amazon, or Jodo's gift cards. If you are nominated by one of our teachers for going above and beyond, you have a chance to win. Also, all honor roll students or principals list students who earn that each 9 weeks will earn a chance to win Apple AirPods. And if a student earns principals list or honor roll multiple times throughout the year, they will be in a drawing for one of 2 Apple Watches at the end of the year. Some great incentives to strive for all A's and B's. Keep striving, Warhawks. Here's some information about yearbook done by our yearbook staff.
A yearbook is an important keepsake from your high school years. A document filled with every club, event, and awkward class picture, sure to last until you're old and gray. Filled with signatures and drawings of your old class chums from way back when. Don't miss out. Order your yearbook today. Lena here knows all about yearbooks. Say, why should Seminole High School students order a yearbook?
Hi, my name is Lena Conway, and I'm the editor-in-chief for Yearbook. You should buy a yearbook because yearbooks are cool.
That's right, Lena. Go to balfour.com to get your limited edition yearbook for only $85 a pop.
Don't forget to get your yearbook at www.balfour.com before the next price increase. Tomorrow's homecoming dress day will be online learning day. Zoom meeting on top, casual on the bottom. On Tuesday, March 30th, USF is doing a virtual college preview for 9th through 11th grade students from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. The goal of this program is for students to learn about University of South Florida, experience a virtual college tour, and get their questions answered regarding financial aid, admissions, and more, all from the safety of our auditorium. This program is open to all 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students, but is limited to the first 200 students to turn in a permission slip to Ms. Driz in A21. Students that attend will miss part of 3rd, 4th, and 5th periods that day, and will have to complete a scavenger hunt worksheet as they watch a presentation. The permission forms for this event are available to pick up in the front office. We now have a clip from Mr. Harris's keyboard class showing you a bit about them. Take a look.
Because the school day is so stressed with our 5 core classes already, so it just gives us that 45-minute break that we can just be by ourselves and just with our own music and not have to worry about anyone thinking we're doing something wrong because they can't hear our music anyways.
It feels like you accomplish a lot by working on different kinds of songs and stuff, and I feel like it gives you the energy you need for the rest of the day.
Classes, it gives me something to look forward to and something to relax for, something just letting me go at my own pace and let me do what I want in it.
Now for some sports news. Today at 2 o'clock, our track team is participating in the Northside Christian Invitational. The tennis team plays at home against Eastlake at 3, and our baseball team takes on Palm Harbor University High School away at 7 p.m. Good luck, Warhawks. Don't forget, tonight is our drive-in movie in the student parking lot. $20 per car or $5 per chair. They will be crowning our king and queen tonight. You won't want to miss it. We are going to end our show with a video from the math department on pi. Not the apple pie, but pi like Archimedes, constant number 3.1415, a math term. Pi Day is this Sunday. Enjoy the video following our show closing. We would love to have your information and activities on the show. Send us your news to merrimanma@pcsb.org. If you are interested in being on the show, we would love to have you. Email us for details. Thank you for watching WTN News and have a great day, Warhawks. Now on to the math video.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make it with Squarespace. Take any circle, measure its circumference and its diameter. The ratio of these two numbers is a mathematical constant we call pi. While this definition is simple, pi has been studied for thousands of years, and a history of our understanding not just of the value of pi, but also what it means, forms a history of all of mathematics. It takes us from the Middle East, to Europe, to China, to India, and even America. It's a history which involves revolutions, murder, and the infinite. Maths is as old as civilization. Older, even. There's evidence of counting going back 30,000 years. And two of the very earliest civilizations, the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians, both investigated pi around 4,000 years ago. The Babylonians estimated pi to be 3 1/8, or 3.125. Now that's the first of a few estimates you're going to hear in this video, so for reference, remember that the first few digits of pi are 3.1415926. There are more. That means that the Babylonian estimate of pi is accurate to 1% of its true value, which is kind of astonishing when you remember that this is a time in human history when iron was first being used and the last mammoths went extinct. The ancient Egyptians, on the other hand, estimated pi slightly less accurately as 3.16. But how do you even estimate the value of pi? You have to kind of by definition measure a curved surface, which is super tricky to do accurately. Well, one way of doing it is to cheat and actually use a square. Compare a square and a circle. Well, a square is a little bit like a circle, but not as much like a circle as a pentagon, which has one more side than a square. And a pentagon doesn't look quite as much like a circle as a hexagon, which has one more side again. And a hexagon doesn't look quite as much like a circle as a heptagon, and so on. You can think of a circle as a regular polygon, just one with an extremely large number of sides. So many sides, in fact, that each individual one is infinitesimally small, meaning that the circle looks round. This was exactly the thinking that legendary ancient Greek mathematician Archimedes used when estimating pi around 220 BC. In fact, it was probably the very last thing he ever did. To approximate pi, he reasoned, why not measure the perimeter of a square, adding up the lengths of all of its edges, and then dividing that number by the square's diameter. But what is the diameter of a square? Is it the length of its diagonal, or the length of one of its edges? Why not both? Said Archimedes. Draw one square with its corners just touching the perimeter of a circle, and another square with its faces just touching the perimeter of that same circle. Add up the lengths of the sides of each square, divide by their effective diameters, and you have two estimates for the value of pi, the true value of which lies somewhere between those two numbers. But here's the really clever part. Because the difference between those two values is pretty big if you're using squares, because a square isn't much like a circle. But replace those squares with pentagons, and you shrink the difference between those two numbers, meaning that there's a smaller range of values that pi could be. Your estimation just got more accurate. And if you replace those pentagons with hexagons, you'll get an even more accurate estimate. Keep increasing the number of faces on the shape that you're drawing inside and outside the circle, and your estimate will get more and more accurate. As long as you have the time and patience to draw said shapes. There is a reason why this thing was called the method of exhaustion. Archimedes got up to a 96-sided shape, which, incidentally, is called an enneaconticahexagon. I really hope I said that right. Giving an estimate of pi between 3.1408 and 3.1429, so accurate to 2 decimal places. As I mentioned earlier, this was likely his final contribution to science, because in 212 BC he was killed by Roman soldiers who invaded his hometown of Syracuse. He was apparently performing this calculation at the time. Allegedly, his final words were, "Don't disturb my circles." European progress in the study of pi died with Archimedes for well over 1,000 years. Fortunately, however, there was plenty of the world which was not in Europe, and mathematicians here were also interested in pi. In particular, 3 mathematical superpowers of the first millennium AD were China, India, and Persia. Ideas from these 3 nations were soon to change the world. First off, Chinese mathematicians used a method of exhaustion similar to Archimedes, but instead of considering the perimeters of shapes, they considered their areas. And this dude, no, I'm not going to try and pronounce his name because I'll only get it wrong, used a polygon with 3,072 sides to obtain pi to 5 decimal places. 200 years later, a father and son team used a polygon with over 12,000 sides to extend that record to 6 decimal places. And that was a world record which stood for 800 years. The problem was, it was just difficult to do these calculations. They weren't especially hard to understand, it was just awkward to write down what you were doing, to physically do the calculation. And this was something that would only be resolved by the introduction of 2 world-changing ideas from India and Persia. Say that you want to do a calculation. You know that you and your friends together weigh 125 kilos, and you also know that you weigh 70 kilos. The question is, how much does your friend weigh? Mathematically, we'd write this as x plus 70 equals 125, where x is your friend's weight in kilos. Subtract 70 from both sides and you get the answer, 55 kilos. Now, in that simple example, I just used 2 ideas which were revolutionary to the classical world. Firstly, I wrote large numbers like 125 and 70 using a simple notation. We take it for granted these days, but the ability to write any number using just 10 symbols and a place value notation, where the position of a symbol in a number determines its size, massively simplifies arithmetic. To see what I mean, try and do that calculation only using Roman numerals. Our modern decimal notation was first developed in India sometime before 400 AD, and then rapidly spread to Persia, where the second key idea came from. The second key idea was representing your friend's weight using some symbol, x, and then manipulating both sides of the equation. This, of course, is algebra. Originally developed by Babylonian and ancient Greek mathematicians, but truly established by Persian mathematician and all-round very influential dude, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Using decimal notation and algebra allowed for much easier calculations across all of maths, and mathematicians working on calculating pi used it to turbocharge their work. After the Renaissance and a renewed interest in mathematics, along with, crucially, new tools from the East, Europe was back in the game, and in 1630 the most accurate estimate of pi using the polygon method was achieved by Austrian astronomer Christian Greinberger, who used a shape with 10 to the 40 sides, yes, really, to calculate pi to 38 decimal places. And then, because mathematicians are sensible people with lives to lead, they decided that was accurate enough and they'd leave it there. Oh wait. The adoption of algebra by European mathematicians triggered a whole new way of looking at the world, a change in thinking generally grouped under the title the Scientific Revolution, which itself went on to inspire the Age of Enlightenment, with thinkers like René Descartes and John Locke. Amongst other ideas, the Enlightenment movement emphasised the value of reason over tradition, and new mathematical ideas were held up as paragons of this. They were pure reason. The change in how 17th century European mathematicians calculated pi is arguably a perfect example of this shift from following what the ancients did to new, rational, theoretical approaches. Because while the ancients, like Archimedes, may have measured the perimeters of shapes increasingly similar to circles, now European mathematicians were using a method based entirely on reason, a method based on infinite series. An infinite series is just an expression made up of things added together, one after the other, after the other, after the other, and so on until forever. If those contributions keep getting smaller as you go on, then the series converges to a particular value. Sometimes you can work out what that value will be using logical arguments, but sometimes you just have to keep calculating term after term after term until you reach an accuracy that you're happy with. The method of using infinite series to calculate pi was first used not in Europe, but again in India. You could kind of argue that what Archimedes did was an infinite series, but the first person to write a mathematical function as an infinite series was Indian mathematician Madhava of Sangamagrama in the 14th century. He wrote down expressions for the sine, cosine, and tangent of an angle, as well as the inverse tangent. Quick refresher. If you write the expression y equals tan of x, the expansion for the tangent would tell you what y equals if you already know what x is, while the expansion of the inverse tangent would tell you what x is if you already know what y is. By its definition, the function tan of x precisely equals 1 when x equals 1/4 pi. That means that if you have an expression for the inverse tangent, then if you plug 1 into that expression and keep calculating terms, you'll end up with an increasingly accurate estimate of 1/4 pi. Madhava did this and calculated pi to 11 digits, but then his method seems to have been forgotten, only to be apparently independently rediscovered in 17th century Europe by Scot James Gregory and German Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. And at this point, everything kicked off. The new decimal notation and algebraic technique allowed for record calculations of pi. In 1699, it was calculated to 71 digits by Abraham Sharp, who was beaten in 1706 when John Machin reached 100 digits, who was in turn beaten by Thomas Fontet de Lagny, I hope that's how you say his name, in 1719 with 112 digits. It wasn't just the case that each of those mathematicians had more spare time than the previous one, they were competing with each other using different infinite series, which converged on pi faster. Instead of just using the inverse tangent infinite series, they might use a combination of different inverse tangent values, or something completely different. The competition then became less about which mathematician had done the most calculations, and instead, which mathematician had the fastest converging infinite series. Development of increasingly efficient infinite series continued well into the 20th century, with the technique kind of coming full circle, as the current infinite series of choice was developed by Indian prodigy mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan. Of course, by the 20th century, mechanical computers had been invented, making it much easier to calculate pi. You basically just used one until you got bored. In 1949, Americans D.F. Ferguson and John Wrench calculated pi to 1,120 digits. But they were bringing a knife to a gunfight, because that very same year, the first calculation of pi by an electronic computer was done, nearly doubling their record with 2,037 digits. From here, the history of pi is basically a list of increasingly powerful computers running for a long time and spitting out increasingly absurd numbers of digits. At the time of recording, the world record for digits of pi calculated is held by Peter Tröb, with a shade under 22.5 trillion digits calculated. The question, of course, is, if we know that pi is going to keep going on forever, it's a transcendental number, why should anybody bother calculating any more digits? Well, for one thing, calculating pi is actually a really good way of making sure that your brand new, shiny computer is working properly. Calculating pi uses up a lot of mental brain power for the computer. You have an answer that you can check yours against, and also, if you keep going just a little bit longer than the previous person, you can have a casual world record. Secondly, pi is actually a really good random number generator. If you look at the first 200 billion digits of pi, you will find the number 0 occurs almost precisely 20 billion times. And the same goes for the other digits, 1 through 9. That means that if you were to pick a random digit in those 200 billion, there's an almost exactly 10% chance of it being 1, and an almost exactly 10% chance of it being 2, and so on. This makes calculating pi to a large number of digits very valuable to people that want to generate random numbers. People working in cryptography, for example. But lastly, and arguably most importantly, people keep calculating more digits of pi for the same reason why people memorize tens of thousands of digits of pi, and the same reason why people climb mountains and swim oceans and invent the double luge. Because they can. Humans are weird. We like to understand the world around us, and as our civilization has developed, we've built increasingly complex tools to help us understand the world. It wasn't essential for our survival that we did that. We just did it because of the way we're wired. Because we could. Pi is a thread that's gone through all of human history because it's a microcosm of how we interact with the natural world. From the ancients to present day, through revolutions in thought and across the world. As long as there are people, there's always going to be somebody who just wonders, what's the next digit? Long may that continue. I'd like to close out this video with two quick announcements. Announcement the first, I finally launched a website. Go to the very shiny and new simonoxfizz.com for a hub for everything I do online, including this YouTube channel, Sponge and Electric, and the Wikicast. There's a page there detailing the gear that I use to make these videos, and coming soon there's also going to be a page detailing all the advice that I give out to people who are interested in applying to the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. And then announcement number two, if you like the look of my website, and why wouldn't you? I built it with